Former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria and immediate past Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, said all the economic gains made by Nigeria in the last 35 years were wiped out between 2014 and 2019 when ill-advised decisions were taken by the managers of the country's resources. Sanusi, who is the leader of the Tijaniya Islamic sect in Nigeria, at a colloquium marking his 60th birthday, stated that no one can afford to be a conformist in an abnormal society. He claims by the end of this year, Nigeria's gross domestic product, or rather GDP per capita, will be worse than it was in 1980, pointing out that spending up to 90% of the country's revenues on debt servicing is unsustainable.
In 1980, Nigeria's GDP per capita on a purchasing power parity basis was $2,180. In 2014, it had risen by 50% to $3,099. According to the World Bank, where were we in 2019? 2,229. At this rate, in the next 2 years, in terms of purchasing power parity, the average income of the Nigerian would have gone back to what it was in 1980 under Shehu Shagari.
All right, joining us to discuss further is Gospel Obele, who is an economist. Gospel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question to you.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Great stuff. Can you put the blame for falling GDP per capita in Nigeria on the two recessions we've had between 2016 and 2020?
First of all, no, and that would be for so many reasons. Prior to that recession, there were already deep issues, all right, around structure, around governance, around institutional ideology, around the indicators that enable for increased or improved GDP capital over time. And we've seen that all of these things have not been in place, all right, and to a large extent, all right, deficits across these lines were part of what led to the recession in the first place. And then a second recession as a result of the lockdown, which to a large extent we did not have any form of control over. But if you look at these two recession events in 2016 and 2020, even our recovery from those two is slowed. And for the 2020 recovery, it's been slower than the 2016 recovery. So the question is not necessarily the recession itself, but rather the different pockets of market, structural, and institutional dynamics, all right, and even the political economy to a very large extent that has gone into management of the Nigerian economy as well as its social economics.
Thanks for that. So what's the impact of falling per capita GDP on the average Nigerian?
It's very, very clear. You know, technically what it means is that the average Nigerian is in a position where he or she cannot get past a certain levels of income engagement, a certain levels of disposable income spend, a certain level of positioning, all right, to attract opportunities or to improve his or her livelihood to a large extent. And in our last two meetings, I talked about the poverty trap and how Nigerians are really struggling to, all right, get past basic needs on a daily basis than to create a meaningful life for themselves. So it's that choke right there, all right, that trap, and we not being able to aspire to do way more because the economics and the dynamics around earnings and earnings per capita for the average Nigeria has been short-lived over time due to structural issues to a large extent.
So what are the solutions then? How do we, from this point going out, grow per capita GDP?
All right, so it's interesting to know that a lot of countries like Egypt, Ghana, and the likes, or even Mauritius and the likes, have grown their per capita GDP over the years, all right? Where we were at 1980, we could have left that stage, all right, way further than that, even past a lot of West African countries, all right? The issues, like I mentioned earlier on, were different pockets of dynamics. That's why we can't look at the conversation from a one standpoint, all right? So if we had done all these things to a large extent, all right, we would not be where we are today. But however, where we are right now gives us a chance to look at the whole thing again and then to grow our chances of improving GDP per capita. But to a large extent, I do not really think the conversations are so much of the hard infrastructural parts, in as much as that's a major part of the discussion. However, I would say that the conversation has been more on the soft infrastructure part, which is what the former CBN governor attributed to poor economic management. All right, there are individuals, there are institutions, there are cultural ideologies, there are political ideologies sitting behind these policies and this unwillingness to engage, all right, structural solutions, all right, to scale GDP per capita in this sense. All right, when you look at education and the human capital index, all of these things still fall down to the fundamentals around the political economy and how we deploy solutions across board, all right, to ensure that the quality of life for the average Nigerian has improved over a period of time. So I would still put the argument strongly on the soft as much as the hard infrastructure is important.
So based on that, does Nigeria have the capacity to expand economic output with the challenges that we currently have?
I believe so strongly that Nigeria has the capacity to expand economic output. There are very, very clear short-term wins, all right? However, even short-term wins should be met with deep structural solutions to ensure that we can scale short-term wins for long-term wins. All right, you can't talk about long-term wins if you can't win in the short term. All right, so if you look at the cluster of poor alignment policies by the central bank and the fiscal policy, the fiscal authorities and the likes, you could see that there's still a lot of work for us to be done. All right. So, but however, there are short-term wins, and one of those wins are, for instance, there are key economic agent markets, for instance, SMEs, who have over time, despite the poor growth in GDP per capita, all right, have grown their businesses, have tapped into opportunities and all the likes. So, if we can simply, all right, build a productive base around the economy and ensure that a critical chunk of SMEs are positioned for access to market solutions, meaning that they can easily export, they can exchange value within and across the borders. If we can do that only by creating the enabling environment, all right, we're talking about infrastructure, the core ideology, values, and all of these things. If we can do that only, then we'll increase the capacity for a significant chunk of thriving SMEs, all right, to give back to the economy, all right, and that's why you begin to talk about shared prosperity, all right. SME growth and development does not necessarily lead to reduction in poverty levels or improvement in GDP per capita, all right. What leads to that is a thriving sector or a thriving cluster of the SME market, all right, to be able to provide jobs and increase chances and of livelihoods for the average Nigerian, all right. So when you have that done in the short term, then we can begin to build other structural solutions to scale, all right, sectoral performance, all right, and to scale a more holistic approach towards improving GDP per capita in the long term. So I think that it's more around latching on short-term wins and then growing and scaling that impact right there in the long term.
We have about a minute to go. Look, we're having images here of the manufacturing going on. Which sectors can power growth for Nigeria? Briefly, if you can.
All right. So agriculture is very important. The reason why I keep starting with agriculture is because you think of fast-moving consumer goods. All right. These are inelastic consumables. Food is very important. So agriculture is very critical. All right. There's also a rising food security issue, all right, which is also affecting conversations around food inflation and all that. So if we can maximize the agricultural value chain, I think that that's going to be a major source of revenue drive and growth in PPP in the sense. All right. We also want to think about best use of technology. All right. Financial systems development in the sense. All right. And these are primarily three sectors: telecommunications, digital, and all of these things are key sectors that have proven over time to be resilient. If you look at the GDP numbers, there are key sectors that have proven to be resilient over the years, regardless of where we are as a nation and as an economy. So I would strongly recommend.
Gospel Obele, economist, thank you so much, Gospel. Always a pleasure having you. Thanks for taking us through
what to do to grow
GDP per capita in Nigeria.